So thank you so much for jumping on my live stream. Thank you, everybody. My name is Ani Rudd, and this is AHR Consulting. We're a law school admissions agency. This is our final deep dive stream. So what I do is basically like I do these deep dives, and then I actually end up like we're posting a lot of the content, and it's really helpful with like student engagement, client interactions, the whole nine. So thank you for joining my last one. I'm very grateful because no one has told me no just yet. And I know we're all busy attorneys taking time out of our day. Like I'm going back to work after this. So
time too. That's crazy.
yeah, so I appreciate you jumping on this for me. This means a lot. So I'm very happy. And we don't get to see each other often either.
We don't.
Like
it's a pleasure.
Okay, so we're gonna wait like a couple minutes to see. Oh, that's my story. Hi, Courtney. So she's in here too. Okay, so we're gonna get started.
Okay.
So let's start from the top, right? What made you go to law school?
Okay. Well, first, for those who don't know or who is the program, I just want to say my name is Bill Lowry Jr. I am an attorney, graduate of 2019 from Loyola Law School in Chicago. Currently practicing law in Chicago for the Attorney General. So that's a little bit about me. So what made me go to law school? Okay, so I was fortunate in that I grew up around law, which is a little bit different when I had some members of my family in law. But what really kind of made me go to law school actually happened in my junior year or going into my junior year of college when I was down in Atlanta. So I got this internship through a friend for this program called Just the Beginning Foundation in Chicago. It's all over the place. Mm-hmm. And basically what it is that it allows like middle school to high school students the opportunity to get exposure to aspects of the legal field, especially those diverse. So they applied and they went to this camp for over a week or whatever the case was. And I got a chance to work there. And that's the first thing that happened was I didn't know how to do anything that we were supposed to be doing with them. We were supposed to be with judges, attorneys, supposed to be setting up mock trials and moot courts and speeches and stuff. And I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. So I had to learn on the fly from these other older law students, which so I could do this work. And then I realized like, oh, I actually am kind of good at this. I actually do like this. And unlike when I was like in chemistry or other science classes, I actually knew what was going on. So it was something where I had that match and I was like, okay, I think this is what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that kind of sent me there was during that program, I saw these students of color from Chicago or from DC or from Atlanta, wherever we were. I saw just like how learning the law and being around that stuff even impacted them, like even in that short amount of time. You have kids, their interaction with law have been through like maybe criminal justice or whatever it is with family members. And it was so empowering. They felt so motivated and they had all these questions. I could see it blossoming. And I wanted that same thing even for me. Like I realized that no matter if it's medicine, healthcare, business, tech, whatever it is that's out there, none of that goes without law. Law is the backbone for everything. And that's what I wanted to do. So that's kind of how I got to law school.
Okay. So what did you do next to prepare for that journey after JTB?
So after JTB, I continued when I was in undergrad to take courses that I thought would help me to get ready for law school. So a couple of like pre-law courses, a lot of writing, a lot of researching, a lot of things I could get up and speak because I wanted to just be ready to go whenever, that opportunity came up. The other thing I did besides obvious stuff, which everybody will know and tell you, LSAT studying and all that stuff. What I tell people even today who are going, I got rest and have fun before I went that last summer. Because law school, what was told to me is that graduate school is a completely different animal than undergrad. It's like a full-time job.
Yes.
So you have to be ready to go. You have to be ready to lock in. You're in class with some people who are maybe 10, 20 years older than you, who have whole families, who have other jobs. Mm-hmm. You have to be, so I made sure just to get rest, to get sleep, to have fun that summer or whatever before I went. So I was ready to commit when the time came, when I was going that fall.
I like that you said that, right? Because I think people don't really understand how much of a commitment it is. Like what I've been seeing lately is like law students blogging, they're TikToking, they're blogging how they're studying for the LSAT. And it's just like, you're not really studying, because when you're really studying, you don't really have time to do that. Like time is of the essence. So it's just like, how do you have time to make all these posts, make all these videos, talk about how you can't get into law school, you can't get a job? Like maybe we should refocus and talk about what it is. And I think like, unfortunately, we're in a, and I was talking about this with attorneys today when I did a volunteer clinic earlier. It's like they're not really getting the picture of like what this really is. Mm-hmm. And I think unfortunately, because of like social media, it's just like, do you understand like what a commitment is? Like, do you understand that like you might not go home for Thanksgiving your 1L year? Like, do you like, I know I didn't, right? Like, do you understand that like you're really studying and reading 300-400 pages a week, and the reading is not interesting? It's, to be honest, it's low-key impossible to get through 300-400 pages. Like I had to buy Quimby because I just needed something to like supplement it. So Quimby is like a case briefing website. So I like that you said like you harped on commitment, because like it's all fun and games to your first year of school, because there are people that are there and it's competitive. You're graded on a curve. Only 5 students are getting that A. Mm-hmm. And only 1-2%, depending on what law school you go to, is getting that big law job. Yep. Right. And I like that I just had to like take a second and address that point, because like it is one of the largest commitments that you will make to really decide to go to law school, because unfortunately a lot of students don't complete the program. You start out with 200 students and sometimes only 180 graduate. Yep. And they don't, and people don't talk about those things. Yep. So what made you commit to Loyola, the finest institution?
We're a little biased for Loyola in Chicago, and that's for those who don't know, that's how me and Anais met. She was my big sib in the Black Law Association and mock trial partner. And he made sure that I was on the right track, even when I was being hard-headed. So anyway, what I would say actually, Loyola was a couple of different things, but it goes back to kind of your previous point. Not only is law school commitment, like in terms of time, energy, mental capacity, all those types of things, financially, like it is expensive. So you don't want to be spending all this money, getting all these loans, and then like, it's kind of like, can I get a job? Can I do these things? So it was definitely a commitment. I knew kind of what I had to do with that. Loyola came in because, number one, and I tie it back into this, they gave me a scholarship, so that helped definitely. But the reason I like Loyola a lot was because of things like this that I'm doing, that you're doing. I met a lot of the Black and alumni and alumni of color in Chicago. It was a really close network. It's a really big network in Chicago. So I'm doing this, and everybody was really nice. They spoke about law school in ways I had not heard. Like the community was good. People weren't as, just conniving and scheming. They were actually helpful and supportive. And because of how much help they offered me early on, I was like, I think this is kind of how I want to be. They had good jobs. They were doing all this type of stuff. So that was the main thing that got me to go there. The other two things that are important when you're looking for law schools is this. Loyola at that time was ranked like number 65 to like 70 in the country. But they were ranked top 10 in advocacy and the advocacy department. I wanted to litigate. I wanted to be like the attorneys on TV that you see in court and doing all those types of things. So I was very particular to look up what schools were best at teaching that. And the other thing too, I knew I wanted to create my network while I was in school so I could have a job. So I wanted to go someplace where I would be in school, where I was going to be practicing law. So Chicago is what made sense.
I think Loyola has one of the finest mock trial advocacy programs. I'm not just saying that because, I went to Loyola, but we did just happen to win a lot of competitions while at Loyola. And I have been complimented on my trial capabilities as a practicing attorney. So I would say that is a good way. I didn't look at Loyola for that reason. I was kind of like, I'm leaving the city. I don't know where I want to go, but I want to be in a city. I just don't want to be in New York City, even though I moved back, right? But I didn't want to be in New York City. But I think like going to Admitted Students Day, which is another thing, like I encourage students to like go see the school, because this is one of the largest commitments you'll ever make in your life. So going to see Loyola, like my stepfather drove 17 hours for us to go see the school. And I was just like, I think this is where I could be at. Like, I think it's like Loyola's in a really good location. And that's something I want students to also consider. Like, I didn't want to be in the middle of nowhere. And there's a lot of excellent schools in the middle of nowhere, but there are a lot of excellent schools in the city, like Northwestern. There's University of Chicago, Loyola, Kent. I think mostly all of the law schools really are in the city, at least in Illinois. Most of them are in Chicago, and it's like the network, right? A lot of people don't understand it. Like where you're making your money is in the city. Same thing with New York City. Like you could live in Long Island all you want, but like the big jobs, the big firms, like the lucrative offices, they're in the city. And,
Exactly.
and it's just like it's so much easier to just walk up the block or just get on the L for 2-3 stops to go to like a Chicago Bar Association event or like the Black Women Lawyer Association event. So I think like the matter of convenience was also something to consider. Not saying ranking's not important, but there are other things to also consider because quite frankly, like everyone's not going to Harvard, right? So like what is the experience that you're really going to look for? Like what is the entire experience that you're going to look for? And I think what you said was great, right? Like Loyola and the network and the advocacy program is going to, shout that out one more time.
Yeah.
Because you're still litigating.
Exactly. You got to be
litigating since you came out of school. I stopped in January. I might be back though. I just need to take some time
back
off.
to the.
But yeah, I might be back. You know me. Do you remember anything that you discussed, like in your personal statement or your diversity statement?
Yeah. So no, I don't actually, because it was a while ago. But when I thought about this, I think the important thing is two things. One, I would have had it still if my hard drive hadn't crashed late October, my first semester of law school. So you can imagine that was probably crazy. The point being, though, is that one of the skills I noticed having to be there and be successful was to adapt and do those types of things. So I'm sure that my diversity statement, if anything, had to do with me being adaptable. But the most important thing that I think of for having read them a lot and done them on this end for an employer, things like that, man, make yourself stand out. And it sounds very, cliche, but when I say that very specifically, you want to stand out on paper. You want the person to be able to almost visualize and see who you are, hear your voice. You do that by, again, how you write, but also your experiences you talk about, what's unique about you, different things that you've done. And I did that. I did a lot of different stuff in college, in high school. I did a lot of different things. You live life. And then you have plenty of opportunities or things to talk about and connect with that somebody else who also maybe has good grades or also went to a good school. They won't have that. And that's one of the best things. If you can make your cover letter entertaining, I think that that's going to set you apart and get you ahead of most people.
Yeah, people want to say, I always wanted to be a lawyer watching Law and Order. And even if that may be true, what else is true?
Yep.
Right? Like that, because that's so cliche. You know how I know that's cliche? Because my first draft of my personal statement, that's what it was. And that's what I was told is so cliche. Even though it was true, once you start to brainstorm, you start to realize that there are other events in your life that like inspired you that you didn't really understand until it's time to put it on paper. Then it's like, oh, wait, this did have an effect on me. Like I've been advocating my whole life. I didn't even realize it. Exactly. Right? I've been motivating or helping someone or had that urge to help someone my whole life. And now I'm able to translate that into, making myself look like a wholesome candidate that's also going to contribute to the law school community. Because at the end of the day, people don't like to hear this. Law school is a business and they're investing in you. So you need to invest in them. And they look at like, is this person going to contribute to the school? Are they going to finish this program and pass the bar on the first time?
Yep.
They don't want to talk about that, but I'm like, there is statistics associated with LSAT score and bar passes. Now, not saying that's the end all be all, but it's just like, looking at the whole picture, like you need to put something on paper that like we're going to care about. And a lot of people they want to tell their story. And I'm like, we all have a story, but like, is this story mean I'm going to finish this? And sometimes that story doesn't, right?
Yeah.
What did you go to law school right after college?
No, I took a year off before for a lot of different reasons, but I kind of just want to get some work experience first.
So what was your first job out of law school?
At a law school, I worked at a private litigation defense firm in Chicago, doing workers' comp and employment defense. So basically, with companies or whatever the case is, if an employee gets injured and they want to sue, I was the bad guys, and we were saying basically trying to catch those who maybe weren't being as truthful. So I was on that side and making sure that people who were injured got, fair treatment and things like that.
Mm-hmm. What did you do in law school to prepare for that law firm job?
So one of the reasons I also decided where I wanted to go to school was because when I looked and asked around, I wanted to go to a school that's going to prepare me to be an actual attorney. It was going to teach you like the law and give you all that like classroom type stuff. I wanted to go somewhere that's going to have me ready to go when I got out. So Loyola was well known for that. So while I was there, I did a lot of what's called experimental learning and real life practical learning. So I was on the mock trial team. So my coaches were practicing attorneys, and I was learning from real people who did it and learning those skills. I also did a lot of writing and research classes, more than what was mandatory for us.
I remember that.
Yeah. So, because I knew that when I first came out, those are the basic skills that are going to get me paid. And those are the ones that are going to keep me around long enough to actually learn how to practice law and learn all the law that comes with whatever I do. So that's what I really invested my time in.
I can speak for myself. I didn't take a bunch of bar courses. I know people say take the bar courses, prepare for the bar. I didn't take the bar courses. I did mock trial. I did advocacy courses. I did deposition advocacy courses. I took a bunch of electives that had open book finals. I did not, because I just had to be real with myself. Like, I knew who I was as a person. I took all the criminal procedure classes, right? Yep. So I'm like, it was more practical. Like, I think the practical learning portion of Loyola really did prepare us, because we were actually like working at places that were actually getting hired. So like, even though I worked at the AG's office, I didn't like end up at the AG's office, but I started at another prosecutorial agency, the Queens District Attorney's Office. So I think like having the skills and like having real writing samples for real actual topics outside of like the law school topics. Unfortunately, like a lot of people don't want to talk about this. Also, a lot of lawyers cannot write. And it's hard. No, but legal writing is so specific. And then it's like when you get into the field and you're working with like appellate lawyers who have been writing for like 40 years, it's very intimidating because that skill set takes so long to build. So I'm all for like the practical learning courses, etc. I should have probably took more of those, because like learning how to write, like I could write, but like when I started working at a firm, then it was like the standard was a lot higher, and appellate attorneys are editing my work. And appellate attorneys, like their standard is like the highest of the highest. Like they're always preparing for an appeal. You never know what might go to the Supreme Court. That's every lawyer's dream. So I like that you said like the type of classes you took outside of the bar courses. Not saying don't take bar courses, you all, but realistically speaking, like your GPA is not going to be that high if all you do is take bar courses. And just being like, you can't take biz orgs, 2 criminal procedures, and professional responsibility in 1 semester and be like, yeah, I'm going to breathe now. It's just not. It's just not possible. Did you do a journal?
No, because I wasn't as much of a fan of writing myself. So that's why I took the classes, so I would still get that skill set. Because I didn't have time to do a journal with trial team and all that.
Because you were on a fellowship trial team. You're being modest. You were on a fellowship trial team, and I was a different type of trial team. So what made you transition out of private practice?
So I transitioned out at the end of 2022. Mm-hmm. Hard decision for me to make at that time. Mm-hmm. Years in, had kind of been a new attorney, going through COVID and all that type of stuff. So I had to learn a whole bunch of new stuff, different stuff. But essentially, at that point, what I realized, there were certain things about the practice itself I didn't like and I wasn't happy doing. Mm-hmm. I guess like by that point, I matured enough as a person where I was like, I can't do this for the next 10, 20, 30 years, like the way I'm feeling every day. Mm-hmm. I also felt like my skill set wasn't being used to the best of its ability.
That's fair. That's a good point.
Yeah, so all those things kind of played a role in me deciding I want to try something new. I also hated in private practice, they have something called, this group is a little bit younger, but it's called billing. It's a way that they private practice has to make money. And the way they do that and how they monitor that is a very like strict process, very time consuming. And those rules or those restrictions put on you as a young attorney can be a lot. So I just wasn't that good at that. I wanted to practice law and do analysis and really do the best I could with the legal result. Unfortunately, the business sometimes get in the way of that. So I decided I wanted to do something new. So I looked to do something. After 3 years, I had some skills. I could sell myself a little bit better. And that's kind of how it happened.
So is it fair to say that you work more in the government than you did at a firm? Because I felt that way, except I can't bill for the time that I do in the government. But I think if I was actually billing, I think the amount of time I spent on my cases in the government, which had a lot more meaning, took a lot longer.
Yeah, yeah. I think honestly it depends on the situation. Civil rights, at least for me, I think you specifically were doing criminal, so that can be a lot more volume and a lot quicker. Civil rights sometimes goes a little bit slower, so my pacing and work-life balance has been better since I moved into this space. But there are definitely times I'm working just as much as I did, you know, outside when I was in private practice, and I can't bill for it. But I'm so much more invested in the work, and it makes so much more sense, and I can feel the effects a lot more. So it's easier for me to do that as far as work kind of goes.
So as a private practice turned civil rights attorney, right? What do you think is the hardest part about your role now?
The pacing, I would say, because when you're in private and you have to do again what I mentioned before, you got to go really fast. You got to do a lot of stuff so that the firm can then have results and be able to make money and bill whatever it is. So I got used to going at that pace, which was good sometimes and not so good other times, especially like if it had to be really, 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 really quick, like immediate responses, all that type of stuff. Switching to government is not that same type of time frame. So now what I find, based on my personality being very type A, and then also being trained and going very fast, is that sometimes government moves very slow. So then I got to be more patient, and then I gotta communicate with people and be very aware that not everybody's going at the pace or intensity that I do things. So I think that's been the struggle, but it's funny because that used to be my weak point in private practice because I wasn't fast enough. But now I'm one of the fastest and best. So it's a skill set here. So just you gotta find your fit.
I see the subtle flex there. Okay. Okay. What is the most rewarding part about being a civil rights attorney?
um, I don't know. I guess so for those, my background is I'm from Chicago. So like I'm from the Southside. So I think that all the work I do, including work with, discrimination, Chicago Police Department, housing discrimination, all those types of things, school systems, it's like I grew up in a lot of these things. I had to interact with a lot of these things. So I think that it's rewarding to see me or to see the results of certain things I'm doing and it affect people around me in my community, like currently, like every night, if I look at the news, every night there's something on the news that I know the Attorney General's office is handling, even if it's not my specific, But most of the time, there's something that my specific bureau touches on. So it's fun to tell friends or family, like, oh, I'm working on that, or oh, I'm doing that, or oh, I'm part of that, because it's impactful work, it's important work. So I think that is the best thing for me in giving that back.
Is it triggering at times?
Yes. I mean, but to be fair, like, and to be a little bit more straightforward and candid, like it's triggering to be a person of color in America every day. So it's kind of like you got to pick your triggering. So it is very triggering. It's very hard some days. It's very tough some days. I think that's why it's important to have balance and be on a good team, which I have, where the mental health stuff is prioritized. Anything that you need to support you, all those types of things are real. And again, work-life balance is a little bit different because it can be very triggering and frustrating when you're dealing with things like that and you're seeing people suffering, and wanting to do certain things, but then certain rules or restrictions or whatever get in the way. But one of the things I learned is that, like, if I really want to make that change, I can do it a lot better from here than I can from doing some other random thing out in the world, even though I don't touch it every day. So, I'll take that, anytime.
Yeah, I think the hardest part for me was like I was always triggered. And I think like I needed a break to figure out what it's like to not be triggered. Now, granted, I transitioned back into the government and it's more of an investigative role, which I enjoy. I don't know about being a prosecutor again, but no, but like I was and I will stand on this. Like I worked at firms, and you've done it. You worked at a firm, you worked in the government. You get the most experience to me in the government. Like but except our like as a prosecutor, like it's actually way too fast paced because we have about 200 cases at all times. What does your caseload look like as far as numbers?
Here,
Yeah.
it's not a set thing, but like it's like basically like 6 or 7 big cases and investigations.
Mm-hmm.
And when I work on, I'm on the CPD team for the consent decree. The Department of Justice back in like 2018, 2019, after Laquan McDonald was shot, implemented a findings and consent decree about what the CPD has to do to reform their police department.
Mm-hmm.
So with that specifically, I get a lot of different work. So that could be multiple assignments at a time. But overall, not having to track as many different individual cases at once, which I like.
That's what I like too. I mean, I feel like I always have a lot of things to do, but it's different having like 100 cases in the government versus 100 cases at a firm.
100%.
It's completely different. It's like an understanding, like I don't know. I just think like when you're in public service, it's just sort of like an understanding that we're all doing as best as we can. Versus sometimes in the private sector, like we're doing the best that we can, but like clients are paying more, so they're not as forgiving. They're not understanding. They don't really care. Like you'll sit in a 5-hour interview, they want the memo the next day, and you have to do it. They don't, because that's what the client wants. Versus like in the government, it's just like I think it wasn't necessarily such a big focus on time. So that's one of the reasons why I transitioned back. I do like the counsel, like the associate general counsel role, even though sometimes I feel like I'm being pulled back into litigations. But as of now, I'm enjoying the investigation role.
Yep.
So are you able to be involved in like any sort of community activities in your role now?
Yeah. Yeah, probably more than I should. So that's just kind of like my personality and how I was raised, is very active in a lot of different things. But in my current role now, as you mentioned, work-life balance and the timing isn't as crazy. So I can have time to do other things if I need to, unless like a super heavy assignment or whatever. But with the consent decree, I'm actually over the community policing section. So
Okay.
up to also now do community events and outreach and engagement. So I'll go to community events. I meet with different advocacy groups, all those types of things, all within the scope of my job on top of what I would normally do, and giving back, doing things like this, or going and speaking at Loyola, whatever it is. And I think too, an important thing I realized like a year ago, like on, is that when I was first at private practice doing those types of things and trying to do like networking, like I hated it. Like I could do it, like the skill, but I hated doing it. It was so unnatural. Like it was awkward. When I got here and I was doing it around things that I actually liked and it made sense to me, like community engagement, civil rights, all of a sudden it became natural. It became like all of a sudden I'm making all this connection. I'm not even trying. Like it's so definitely have time to do that, and it's definitely something I think that it's good to do it around something you're interested in.
So I like what you said. I'm going to touch on that, right? The time to do that. Oftentimes, right, like you're not going to be successful if you don't network. And sometimes like it is hard to sit for 12 hours and then go to a bar association event, or sit for 10 hours, go to bar association event and come back. And that's not something you can do all the time. But, the big, like, grades are important. The firm you went to is important, but networking is so important. Like building like real relationships and friendships. Like, I've had a bunch of Loyola people come on my deep dive. Like, that's what I'm saying. I'm just like, just having like real friendships, and everything's not going to be like, how like me and you speak, but at the same time, it's just like a professional network on top of that, like having somebody be able to vouch for your work ethic, or hearing positive things about your work ethic. Like that is more important, because oftentimes like you might see someone in a role and you didn't understand how they got that role, but it's just like someone can speak on their behalf and that's how they got that role. Because even if they don't have, I don't know, like civil rights experience, but the experience that they do have is like this elite type of experience. And that's why they were able to succeed in that role. So yeah, like today I went to a pro bono clinic, and I'm like, it feels good to like have time and have a job that's understanding of me wanting to do this. And then even though I have to, do some more work, obviously, because I'm a professional, it feels good to be like, okay, I actually have the time and I'm not rushing to leave on top of that, right? Like I can actually focus on what's in front of me, because in my opinion, sometimes like the community really needs to see us, because they don't see a lot of Black attorneys. To be honest, we don't see a lot of Black attorneys when we go, like, it is what it is in the government at a private sector. So I think oftentimes like to increase diversity and whatever issues that need to be handled in our communities in general, they need to see people that look like us. So I'm glad that you made that point as well.
Yeah. Very
But
important.
how do you balance like your career and like your life and the community activities?
Yeah. So honestly, like it's an ongoing like process and learning. Like as things change, like it's not something I feel like you necessarily figure out and you like just done. It's part of continuing to grow and learn. So like me switching jobs and coming here, I had to kind of readjust in how I was doing things. So how I balance it, I mean, I just try to, first of all, I guess in my head, I know my priorities outside of like work. So I know I won't be able to do my work if I'm not like mentally and physically like healthy. So that typically comes first, and part of that is like spending time with family and friends or whatever. Like I make sure to do those things because I know the work. In order for me to do good work, I have to do those things. So I've always been told like set boundaries. I'm not always that good at doing that, but like the main key things that you know really make you happy or healthy or whatever, just those things. Even when it's hard or whatever it is, because long term I've noticed, especially the last couple of years, like if I don't do those things, I start getting like angry. I'm not as happy, whatever the case is. So that's really just making that time to do it, and it does mean sacrifice. Um, but one thing I was told is that there are seasons for everything. So just because right now isn't a season for you to do all these other things over here that you want to do, doesn't mean it won't be later. You've got to kind of pick and choose and then kind of go forward.
And to our last question, what do you think is the hardest hurdle that you've had to get through since you began practicing law?
The hardest hurdle I would say, outside, the hardest hurdle I would say is it's not imposter syndrome, but it's continuing to believe and be confident in my thoughts, my ideas, my analysis, knowing that the way I think and do things is different than maybe traditional how other people who've been in certain places do it. And then there's always this pushback. So it's continuing to be confident in these new ideas, these innovations, these whatever, this different way I'm looking at it, and then supporting that, even when there's pushback from people above me. And it takes courage, it takes a lot of stuff. And it's been hard some days. I question, like, maybe I don't know XYZ, but normally when I follow through on it, most of the time it ends up being helpful. New. That's really been the thing, is continuing to push and advocate for yourself, even as you're in a new job and advocating for others.
Thank you. This was really informative. This is probably one of my favorite discussions I've had so far. Does anyone have any questions before we wrap up? This is the perfect opportunity. If you have any questions about anything that we discussed, or just any questions that maybe we didn't discuss, this is the perfect opportunity to ask.
If you have a question, I'll answer it.
I know one of the viewers that were on, she's actually interested in like civil rights law, and she's like pretty active in like the NAACP and like other organizations. So I'm happy that she was on the call while you were speaking about like your work experience. I'm like, oh, this is really important for her to hear.
Yeah, and I think other thing too to that, something you said, like networking was important. Like I got this job through somebody I met through Loyola, who was like 2 classes above me, who was on mock trial or whatever. But she talked to another alumni who knew I was looking for a job, who was like, oh, I know I'm looking for something. So he passed my information along. But none of that came from me networking. It was all just natural interaction. So that's kind of important. And the other thing you said, they vouched for my skills and my work ethic, because I didn't have prior civil rights experience. So it gave me a shot. And I think that just goes again to show you. So you don't have to necessarily have this work. You learn the law as you work. If you can come in with the skill set and the personality, then people will, invest in you.
Yes, I think we should all like also like tap into our networks, like, outside of us being big sib, little sibs, like we are fraternity, brother, sorority, sister relationship, right? And I love to tap into that network at times too. I think it's also important to like when you're on mock trial, when you're joining a club, when you're joining a bar association, whatever it may be, I think it's important to like build actual friendships. Because I've told you, like, one of my former mock trial coaches wrote me a recommendation letter for a job, and now I didn't take that position, but during my interview, she was just like, so-and-so wrote a beautiful letter for you. I have never seen this letter before. I don't remember if I asked to see it, but he probably wasn't going to send it to me anyway. But little things like that really stuck with me, because she made me an offer on the spot just based on his letter. Mind you, I submitted like 2 or 3, but like his letter alone from someone in another completely different state, like the way that whatever he said about my character was like, I will give you an offer right now.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen all the time. Now, granted, I didn't take that position, but it did give me the confidence that I needed, and to also leverage other positions. Like, hey, I got an offer at this office. Can you make me a better offer? And I took another office. But I'm saying, like, I really think like that was honestly because of him that I was able to get that position. And I'm like, okay, wow, like, so they believe in me. Okay, now let me believe in myself and make a phone call and tell them, hey, I just got an offer today. Can you let me know if I'm getting a third round of an interview, if I'm getting a position or not? And that job only gave me, the one I didn't take, gave me like a few days to take the job. I got that offer quicker from the other office. So little things like that. I mean, I've struggled with imposter syndrome too, but there be little things that have happened in my career that I'm like, no, Anis, you got this. You got this.
Yeah. You gotta push forward on that type of stuff.
Even when it's hard to, but we gotta, and that's why it's important to build network, because there's people who like, I can text me like, hey bro, can you believe this happened to me today? Yeah. And a lot of people don't understand that, and they don't understand how important that is. And like, you can text your friends, but it's different when you're texting a friend that's an attorney who knows exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, they can
give you like real like, practical advice to use.
Exactly. That's important.
Okay, we are wrapping up now. Thank you so much. This was such a good session. I will send you the clip after.
Having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. And we will chat soon.
Okay. Everybody, good luck. Pleasure talking.
Thank you. Okay. Bye. Bye.